Part 126. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1253. Dali Temple Minister did not go to Zishan camp for military parade today, but he knew the news that Chi-Heiran was going to Zishan camp for military parade today, so he was very surprised to see Chi-Heiran appearing in Dali Temple. Dali Temple has always only tried major and important cases, and Dali Temple Minister felt that if Prince Rong made trouble for no reason and asked him to settle some trivial matters, he would throw them out. Chi-Heiran ignored the guard of Dali Temple Minister, pointed to the dozen or so people who were tied up and said, "These are the assassins who assassinated the Crown Prince and Prince Rong's son. Lord Bai, the Emperor ordered us to thoroughly investigate this matter." The minister of Dali Temple opened his mouth wide and asked, "Isn't this matter handled by the prince?" Master Bai said cryptically, "After all, this matter involves a foreign country, and Dali Temple is not easy to manage. Everyone knows that the prince and Qi Wenjin tied up the emperor of Dayuan together, forcing the other party to increase their troops and let them take the opportunity to take back the lost land occupied by Zixia, so both Dayuan and Zixia hate them to death. Before the two of them met the assassin before they arrived in Shandong, they had a lot of trouble in Chaoshang. However, everyone was indignant on the face, but they felt that it was right in their hearts. If their emperor was captured, they would definitely kill each other as much as possible to avenge their shame." Chi-Heiran didn't wait for Lord Bai to finish thinking about all this mess, before throwing a thunderclap and said, "These people are all from Daki. The emperor ordered that all their accomplices must be found out." Master Bai's complexion changed. His first intuition was that the scrambling for the heirloom had started again, and the princes in the palace were dishonest, but Prince Rong said with a cold look on his eyes, "I want to see." Qin Fang stayed behind. "There are many people, but this king has caught more." These words passed from ears to mind, and he raised his hand to interrupt Chi-Heiran. "Wait a minute, my lord, who did you talk about just now? The official is not in good health, so I didn't seem to hear clearly for a while." Chi-Heiran said with black lines all over his face, Qin Fang, the traitor of the former court. Did Master Bai understand now? But didn't he die 13 years earlier? You were the prince who surrounded him to death. Chi-Heiran's face turned darker, and he reiterated righteously, "Qin Fang was not killed by this king, but by the second prince who conspired against him. That's what you forced." Master Bai wisely did not say these words, coughed lightly and asked, "What evidence does the Lord have to prove that they are the traitors of Qin?" "The evidence that Xiaobao and Xiaoxiang handed over is very sufficient. Under the tunnel, there are not only the portraits of Qin Fang, but also the letters between Qin Fang and several adoptive sons, and even the property he bought for them, raising private soldiers for them provide money." The more Mr. Bai watched, the more startled he became, the more angry he became, and finally he couldn't help but yelled, "It's unreasonable. Qin Fang has been dead for more than 10 years, and she even ran out to make trouble. It's really dead but not stiff. No wonder the common people call him a monster." There are quite a few people who have the same idea as Mr. Bai. When news of the assassination of the Crown Prince came out, the court couldn't help but shake twice, but when the news about Qin Fang and the bandits' declaration of resistance came out, the court shook 3 times. The ministers condemned the treacherous prime minister excitedly in the court hall, but most of the remaining officials from the previous dynasty were in danger, for fear that the emperor would liquidate the affairs of the previous dynasty. We must know that when Qin Fang was in power, except for a few elders who dared to give him face in person, the others in the court greeted him with smiles, and now 4/5 of the former courtiers have given him gifts. Perhaps because of a guilty conscience, these people's condemnation was especially loud, and Qi Ziyuan's head grew dizzy from hearing it. And soon the voices from the court quickly affected the people, and the Times also made a special report on this matter, and even used a page to count Qin Fang's crimes, but how can this one page be enough? So at the end of the article, there are 2 big bold characters etc. The common people were even more violent than the ministers in the court. Knowing that Qin Fang's adoptive son and his subordinates actually enshrined his portrait, the common people drew his portrait and put it on the ground in front of the house to show their hatred. Tea houses and restaurants are everywhere. Talk. Some even cried until the Yamen demanded that Qin Fang's body be dug up and whipped. 13 years is a long time, and the newborn baby has grown into a teenager, but the time of 13 years is also very short. In the troubled times, middle-aged people, youths, teenagers, children, and even the elderly were still alive. The pain of losing my compatriots in my homeland, the despair of living today and not necessarily having tomorrow is still deep in my bones and blood. For the Han people in the north and west, what they lost was their homes and relatives, and what they faced was the pain of being betrayed by the motherland and the tragic situation of being enslaved by the Jin people and the Xixia people. What is more hateful is the exorbitant taxes and exploitation that have increased year by year. They can't understand why such a person still has people wholeheartedly loyal. Even Qi Ziyuan didn't expect the prestige of dumping Qin Fang among the people. His face became more serious and he said privately to several important ministers, "The people have deep grievances. The local Yamen should guide the evacuation as soon as possible to avoid conflicts." Yan Du hated Qin Fang deeply, and heard the words, "Your Majesty, Qin Fang's crime is extremely heinous, it is better to have the court come forward to convict him, it is worse than the people to denounce spontaneously, and it is easy to cause accidents." Rong Xian's complexion darkened, and he said, "Master Yan, Qin Fang's crime was already convicted 13 years ago, how can there be any further convictions?" Yan Du lowered his eyes and said, "But the common people are not satisfied with this. They have been oppressed by Qin Fang too much, so they have to vent something." Seeing that he was forcing the emperor to obey the proposal of digging graves and flogging corpses, Rong Xian was very displeased, and continued, "But Qin Fang is dead, and all grievances have disappeared, and the corpse should not be used as an issue, let alone the emperor, the sage. How can you do such shameful things as digging graves and whipping corpses?" Although Qi Ziyuan also hated Qin Fang, he really didn't want to dig people's graves, flog people's corpses. Death is everything. What he wants to catch now is the nails left by Qin Fang, not the dead Qin Fang. Hold on. He looked at the other ministers with deep eyes, and asked, "What do you think?" "Your Majesty, the ministers have seconded Yan Yuxiang. Now that the people are agitated, we must find a way to appease their anger." "I think this is inappropriate," this one agreed, and the other immediately jumped out and said, "Your Excellency Zhou is right, death is a matter of death, the emperor and a saintly king must not do such a thing that damages benevolence." Seeing that they were arguing first, Qi Ziyuan waved his hands with a headache and said, okay, let the Yamen pay attention to evacuate the people first, and no safety accidents will be allowed. Other matters will be discussed at the court meeting tomorrow." After driving the man out of the imperial study, Qi Ziyuan immediately sent someone to find Qi Heiran, and asked, "How is the investigation going? If you don't get him out, there will be chaos." Qi Heiran's face turned ashen and said, "All kinds of punishments have been used. They bite to death without opening their mouths. They are really loyal to Qin Fang. The reborn wife is farming." Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1254. Qi Ziyuan rubbed his forehead with some headaches and said, "Isn't there any clue? Ordinarily, even if there are so many people hiding well, there will still be traces leaking out, because private soldiers also eat, drink and scatter, and there will be loopholes if necessary. They are very secretive, and there are shops and farms in front of them as cover. It is difficult for the government to find out, and they should be independent, so we can't find any clues in the cottage, and only the bandit leader may know each other's news, but they can't open their mouths, and we can't really kill people. I don't believe there will be no traces of them at all." Qi Ziyuan said coldly, "Isn't this cottage exposed because of the murders of the Qin family and Yu Shui students? If they are really tyrannical and can't help but kill, that's all. The murder of the Chin family and those 10 students was an accident. These people can lurk in the mountains for more than 10 years, just to find the right opportunity to assassinate them, such as the assassination of Xiaobao and Xiaoxiang this time, because various conditions are suitable for the assassination, so they took action. How could such a person who practiced martial arts hard in a cottage when the conditions were immature but hide behind closed doors for some money kill passers-by? It's just because Uncle Chin and the dozen or so students passing by found some clues. Regarding these two matters, the dozen or so bandits did not keep their mouths shut. As long as their accomplices are not involved, these people are very talkative and answer questions. In the previous 2 murder cases, he told the other party as soon as he asked about it. Combined with Grandma Chin's words, it is not difficult to guess the truth. Uncle Chin has always liked to talk about strange things, and he likes to find out more when encountering strange things. He also likes to travel around, so he often travels everywhere, and his knowledge is naturally extraordinary. Because this time he took his wife and children south to seek refuge with his uncle, Qin Shanjiang, so he no longer took the risky path, and even if he was greedy for the beauty of the mountains and rivers, he would choose the right path, so that he would inevitably miss the place and spend the night at the farmhouse. Due to his temperament, Uncle Qin loves to talk about local wonders with the local people wherever he goes. One day they stayed at the farmhouse, which was not far from the mountain in the cottage. The villagers told Uncle Qin that there were monsters in the mountain, and no one was allowed to enter the deep mountain. They also eat 3 meals a day. Occasionally, they will see smoke rising from the deep mountains when it is cooking time. The villagers felt that Master Juran was well informed, so they asked him with a smile, since they are spirits, they should drink the wind and eat the dew. Why do they still need to light a fire to cook like us? Grandma Chin remembered that her husband's answer at that time was, I'm afraid that these spirits haven't cultivated enough, so they are not out of the ordinary. Such spirits are the most dangerous. They may even eat people in order to replenish their energy. Why don't you tell me and let them? Don't go into the mountains easily, and don't go deep into the mountains if you have to. Grandma Chin wiped her tears and said, at that time, I thought it was strange, and I also blamed the old man for scaring the villagers, because although the old man loved to hear about these ghosts, he never believed that there are ghosts and spirits in this world. He often told the children that there are no gods in the world. Buddhas, people want gods and Buddhas in their hearts, so there are gods and Buddhas in this world. There will be no ghosts and ghosts in this world, but people are afraid in their hearts and often attribute unexplainable things to ghosts and ghosts. Grandma Chin cried, if I had asked a little more at that time, I would have stopped him from walking along the path. The bandit leader said to Chi Heiran, although we act in secret, we are inevitably negligent, so we often ask people to pretend to be wandering doctors or shopkeepers to inquire in various villages and towns under the cottage. Once something happens, we can deal with it as soon as possible. In the past, some people suspected it. There were people in the mountain, and even encouraged people to enter the mountain to look for it. The bandit leader sneered and said, we will kill all the people who entered the mountain and those who heard about it, and then let people spread some ghost stories. People dare to go deep into the mountains. The man surnamed Chin is very good. He sent those villagers according to the theory of ghosts, otherwise we would kill them by accident. In fact, if it weren't for Mu Bowen and the others, the disappearance of the Chin family would have been an accident. They were also arrogant at the time, thinking that the Chin family had only a dozen members, and they were powerless, so just selected more than 20 people from the bottom and sent them out, who knew they would hit the iron plate. They wanted to send someone to kill Mu Bowen and his party, but at that time they moved quickly and quickly entered the nearest county town. They could kill people in the suburbs, but they couldn't in the city. The possibility of being discovered and caught it was too big, and they also found out that Mu Bowen's identity was not simple, so they let him go away alive. As for the dozen or so traveling students, it was a complete accident. They don't know who heard the nonsense that they think there is a mine in the mountain, because they have been failing in the exam, so they want to take a shortcut to make a contribution, and a dozen people meet to go to the mountain to investigate. They learned some surveying skills and invited 2 hunters to lead the way into the mountain, but they found the cottage by accident. When those scholars looked at the defenses of the cottage, they knew that they were not ordinary bandits, they were no different from rebellion. The bandit leader sneered and said, they thought they had made great contributions and could use it to get promoted, but they didn't expect that we would find them too. They died before they could report the news, but those 2 hunters were luckier. At that time, they fled into the mountains and disappeared without a trace, but they didn't return home, so they probably were eaten by wild animals in the mountains. Chi-Heiran couldn't get used to the complacent look of the bandit leader, and said, so what, you killed people and showed your whereabouts, and let the people in the court find you. The bandit leader sneered and said, that's because we were unlucky and we didn't act well. It will be difficult for you to find other people. If you don't kill us, we will live by watching your jokes, ha ha ha. After Chi-Heiran finished the interrogation process, he said angrily, brother, do you think there is any other way to pry their mouths open? Can Dolly psyching also help? In addition to using torture, he just reasoned with the other party. Those people were devoted to Qin Fang. Even if he presented Qin Fang's various evidences of Qin Fang's crimes in front of them, they would dismiss them and say, no matter how the foster father treats others, he treats us as well. It is the kindness and righteousness that is as important as heaven. It not only saved our lives, but also gave us clothes to wear, food to eat, houses to live in, and even read and write. Reason with him. Qi Ziyuan had no choice but to look at his younger brother silently for a moment, and could only wave him away. When Chi-Heiran returned home, Tigerhead and Little Lion were leading their younger siblings to sing. Chi-Heiran frowned after hearing this sentence, and asked, how did you learn to sing this song? This was written by the great Confucian Chen Guangdi to satirize Qin Fang. It was spread among his students, and by now it had spread all over the streets and alleys. Chen Guangdi used this to restore his previously damaged reputation. Many people on the street are singing it. We thought it sounded good, so we learned it and sang it for our mother. Mu Yangling patted their heads and said, okay, I already understand, isn't it just comparing Qin Fang to a big mouse, you go to the garden to play, I will talk to your father. The Tigerhead and the Little Lion immediately ran into the garden singing loudly, and the Little Lion and Bezo followed suit while singing. I went out with my children today and heard people singing this song on the street. I even saw people condemning Qin Fang in restaurants and tea houses. The people sitting around were very excited. I was sitting in the car and thought that as long as I lightly a light swipe of the flint can detonate everyone's emotions, and I'm afraid it will be difficult to control by then. Brother just told me about this, but the common people were greatly stimulated, and they were so excited because they were pushed by someone with a heart, but those bandits in the sky prison were beaten to death and refused to confess. We can't find their accomplices. There is no way to vent everyone's anger. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1255. Mu Yangling frowned, and said, Qin Fang is indeed a traitorous minister. No one can deny this, but he is not alone in making De Zhou's family and country look like a country. Even if there is no Qin Fang, there is Zhou Jiaozong and Zhou Jiaozong with descendants like Emperor Jinjian, Daz who will become like that one day. You must know that Qin Fang came to power after the imperial court went south, and was favored by Emperor Jinjian. De Zhou lost half of the Northland, not because of him. But General Yuan had already taken back half of the land. If he hadn't slandered and made the court bow before De Jin, he would not only throw away the land he had taken back, but also cut off 2 more cities, signed Nasui coins, and claimed to Dejin. With such a humiliating treaty like my brother, how can our soldiers in northern Xinjiang suffer from chaos? Chi Heiran was furious, and he still remembers the grief and indignation when he heard the news of his elder brother, even though he was still young at the time, and he hadn't had a deep understanding of his family and country. Meaning, but this does not prevent him from hating a person named Qin Fang. And this is also one of Qin Fang's main criminal evidences. Mu Yangling said lightly, I know Qin Fang is very bad. My family is in Xinzhou Prefecture. Should I hate him even more? But I always know that Qin Fang came up with the idea, but the one who made it's Emperor Jinjian. Qin Fang is a treacherous prime minister, he is a big villain, he is a Sima, and the prime minister has not fulfilled his responsibility, so what about Emperor Jinjian? Has he fulfilled his duty as an emperor to guard the country and protect the people? What about the generals in the court? Except for General Yuan, where did the other generals go? What about the censor in the court? The censor supervises all officials, and the prime minister is also one of them. Impeaching Qin Fang like one? Which of the 6 officials is worthy of the people of Dazhu? Chi Heiran opened his mouth and closed it. Nowadays people in the world attribute the subjugation of Great Zhou to Qin Fang alone. Although he is indeed a traitor, I still disagree. What do you want? What can I do? Mu Yangling shrugged his shoulders indifferently, I'll just tell you what I think, anyway, it's not us who are being slandered, let alone someone I care about, I don't need to fight against the people for him. No, you'd better do it right, Chi Heiran said thoughtfully, tell the people what you said for Qin Fang. Mu Yangling was horrified, do you want me to be thrown rotten eggs when I go out? Chi Heiran looked at his wife with piercing eyes, you must have a way to help him speak, and also prevent yourself from being thrown rotten eggs. Aling, please help me, the people are excited, the elder brother urged me, but I really can't catch those people for a while. If you can't catch it for a while, when will you catch it? Chi Heiran said confidently, the shortest is 1 month, and the longest is 3 months. I will definitely find them out, but judging by the way the fire is cooking oil outside, I'm afraid something will happen in a few days, so you act quickly, help me to marry me. Although Chi Heiran didn't say the last sentence, his big eyes looked at Mu Yangling without blinking. Mu Yangling could feel the heat even when he turned his back, and was speechless immediately. Chi Heiran's eyes became more and more pitiful, and even used his beauty, he stepped forward and hugged her. Mu Yangling shuddered, pushed the person away without being moved at all, and said helplessly, okay, I'll help you, but let me put the words down first, no matter how much I help you, you are not allowed to settle accounts with me. What are you going to do? Mu Yangling glared at him, what else can I do? Of course I've spoken for Qin Fang as you wished, but can you really catch their accomplices? Didn't you say they didn't confess at all? Although they didn't confess, I also found some clues from their words. It is impossible for so many of them to hide their whereabouts. For example, didn't Uncle Qin and those 10 or so students find their traces? A lot of people were killed by covering up, so did they use this or similar means to deal with the same thing in other places? Although it takes a long time to investigate one by one, it is still a way, Chi Heiran sighed, it's a pity they didn't confession, if they open their mouths, I will be able to arrest them immediately. Mu Yangling was silent for a moment, and asked, are they really so loyal to Qin Fang? Chi Heiran nodded helplessly, they feel that Qin Fang raised them, and based on this alone, they should do anything for him, including revenge. Mu Yangling sneered, really? Then I want to see how deep their loyalty to Qin Fang is. Chi Heiran felt as deep as the sea, because Dali Temple used all available punishments on them, and even boiled water in front of them to scald one person, and the others closed their eyes and did not speak. This loyalty may not even compare to the dead soldiers trained by the royal family. Mu Yangling felt that these people were said to be Qin Fang's adoptive sons, but they were actually Qin Fang's dead soldiers. Mu Yangling didn't deal with the public opinion of the people immediately, but took a few guards to the prison to mention the prisoners. Lord King Bai of Dali Temple looked at Wang Fei helplessly, and said resolutely, "Wang Fei, this is a prisoner, and he is a vicious person. You really can't take him away." Mu Yangling took a picture of the note Qi Heiran gave her, and said, "My lord agrees." Lord Bai twitched his mouth. No wonder the prince didn't come to Dali Temple today. He ran away. He resolutely refused again. Even if the prince agrees, he can't take it away. What if the emperor agrees? Mr. Bai felt that the emperor would not mess around like the prince, so he nodded and said with a smile, "If the empress can get the imperial edict from the emperor, I will let you go." So Mu Yangling randomly called a guard, handed him the letter he had already written, and said, "Hurry up and go to the palace to see the emperor." While Master Bai was stunned, Mu Yangling sat in the lobby drinking and waiting. Lord Bai thinks that the emperor has two ways to refuse. One is to refuse directly, so that he can be freed soon, but if the emperor accidentally uses the second method, that is, the word drag, he will be miserable. If the guard doesn't come back, will he stay here with the princess all day? He still has a lot of official duties to do, so Mrs. Bai decided that he would only wait for 2 cups of tea, and if he didn't come by then, he would find a reason to go out and let the concubine wait by herself. Dali Temple was not too far away from the palace, and the guards were on top of their horses, so they arrived at the gate of the palace very quickly. Knowing that it was Princess Rong who wanted to deliver a letter to the emperor, the palace people who were afraid of Prince Rong did not dare to neglect, so they trotted to the door of the imperial study after receiving the letter, and no one dared to stop it along the way. The letter was soon handed over to Eunuch Wan. As the emperor's personal eunuch, Eunuch Wan knew that the uncle of the emperor had an unusual relationship with the younger siblings of Princess Rong. In his opinion, the emperor looked at the princess not only for his sister-in-law, but also for his younger sister, so the two sometimes had a relationship. Communication: sometimes the princess dared to say what the prince would not dare to say in front of the emperor. And the emperor also attached great importance to this concubine, so once he received the letter, Eunuch Wan did not dare to neglect, and regardless of the fact that the emperor was still negotiating state affairs with the ministers, he directly took the letter and sent it in carefully. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1256. Qi Ziyuan took the letter and opened it. The secretary of the Ministry of Justice who was making a report immediately stopped and stood respectfully. Rongxian, Yandu, and the others glanced up cautiously, and then stood with their eyes and nose, and their noses and hearts. Qi Ziyuan quickly glanced at the letter, directly pulled a piece of white paper, picked up a vermilion pen and wrote 2 words on it, then took out the jade seal on one side, stamped it, and handed it to Eunuch Wan. Eunuch Wan knew that he had done the right thing, and he was happy, but he bowed and took the paper without revealing anything, turned around and left. The one with the jade seal is considered an imperial decree, but this imperial edict is obviously too casual, so after thinking about it, Mr. Wan thinks it's better to keep a low profile, lest the imperial censor come to bother the majesty tomorrow. Eunuch Wan folded up the paper and put it in another envelope, called his apprentice, and asked him to deliver it to the princess himself. So, Master Bai, who was thinking of a reason to leave, not only saw the guard who entered the palace to ask for orders, but also saw the servants around him. He just watched helplessly as a servant took out a letter from his arms and handed it to the princess respectfully. Mu Yangling opened it and saw the 2 big red characters aloud on it, and immediately handed the letter to Master Bai with a smile on his face, and said with a smile, "Master Bai, can I take him away now?" Master Bai looked helplessly at the imperial pen and zuzu on the paper. It was the handwriting of the Holy Majesty, and as the minister of Dali Temple, he was still sure of this. "My lord, these dozen or so criminals are vicious people, Why are you taking them? Mu Yangling spat out 2 words and said, shopping. Master Bai opened his mouth wide. So Mu Yangling asked people to change the dozen bandits and the black-clothed assassin into clean clothes, and then asked them to help them out of the prison. They had all been severely tortured, and they couldn't escape even if they let go of their hands and feet at this time, so Mu Yangling didn't ask people to put shackles and chains on them, but instead asked people to help them. One of them saw that it was a woman who interrogated them, and immediately looked at Master Bai with a sneer, why, men's whips don't work, and they started to ask women to interrogate us. Let me tell you, no matter what tricks you use, we will never betray our righteousness fathers. Lord Bai said angrily, keep your mouth clean, do you know who this is? This is Princess Rong. Now all the people looked up at Mu Yangling, and said after a while, very well, we remember you, if we can get out alive, you are also one of the people we will kill. Mu Yangling twitched the corner of his mouth, and couldn't help asking, are you really Qin Fang's sons? I think you are like the sons of a fool. The bandits were stunned and asked, who is the second idiot? Mu Yangling shook his head sincerely, I don't know, I'm just a fool. Master Bai twitched his cheeks, and at last he had to use all his strength to keep the corners of his lips from falling. He looked carefully at the dozen or so prisoners, and felt that what Wang Hao said was true. He had also seen the insidious and cunning Qin Fang before. These people are not at all like those cultivated by Qin Fang. The black-clothed assassin looked at Mu Yangling faintly, and said in a hoarse voice, she's playing tricks on you. The bandits glared at her angrily for a moment. Mu Yangling turned around indifferently and said, let's go, I'll take you to the street to play. Master Bai hesitated for a moment, and followed up decisively. These dozen or so criminals are going to be criminals. What if they lose them and escape? The prince can escape, but he can't. Master Bai followed up righteously, and as soon as he lifted the curtain of the carriage, he met Chi Heiran's big smiling face. Seeing that it was Master Bai, Chi Heiran immediately put away his smile and asked, why is it you? This is my wife's carriage. Master Bai pointed to the outside with a wooden face, and said, the concubine picked up so many important criminals at once, and the servant had to follow. The servant found out that my carriage was borrowed by the prince early this morning. There is no other way but to use it temporarily. For the princess has already ridden forward. Mu Yangling, who was riding on a horse, heard Chi Heiran's voice in the carriage, and immediately got on his horse, bent down and asked, why are you here? Didn't you say you are in a hurry? Yes, I also really want to know why the prince is so urgent that he left this important case behind. You must know that the prince is the person appointed by the emperor. Lord Bai turned his head and said gently to Mu Yangling, the princess doesn't mind being dismissed. Please delay the prince for a while, I really have a lot of questions that I want the prince to answer. Chi Heiran's avoidance in the morning was because he didn't want to face Master Bai, and he really wanted to know why the Alingti prisoner was hiding in the carriage, but he was still caught by Master Bai. Chi Heiran looked at his wife pitifully. Mu Yangling immediately decided to help her relatives or not. She coughed lightly, looked at Lord Bai apologetically and said, I also want to ask the prince about some cases, and Lord Bai also knows that the prince has often asked about this case these days. I don't want to go home, there are many things I don't have time to ask in the future, why don't Lord Bai let the prince to me first? Okay, I'll lend you me. Chi Heiran nimbly flashed past Master Bai before Mu Yangling finished speaking, and immediately sat on Aling's horse. Master Bai looked at the prince with a face that couldn't bear to look directly, and could only put down the curtain of the car helplessly. Chi Heiran sat behind Mu Yangling and hugged her. Although he really wanted to ride with Aling, the influence of the public was not very good, so he could only wave his hand to the guards to bring another horse. Chi Heiran jumped onto another horse and sat down before turning his head and asking, are you really taking them shopping? Certainly. Naturally, Mu Yangling couldn't really drag them from the street to the end of the street, but directly found a tea house in the south of the city. The group got off the car at the corner of the street and went directly to the tea house to sit down. Most of the people living in the south of the city are poor people, and the slums in the capital are located here, so most of the people who come to this tea house to drink tea are ordinary people, and they can often drink a whole pot of tea for only 2 cents. Mu Yangling and the others don't say how expensive their clothes are, but they look like they are not the same as the people in the tea house, and everyone looks at them. But Mu Yangling sat down on a bench with no change in expression, and said to everyone, "Sit down too." He called Xiao Er again to order something for a table. Xiao Er asked a lot, "Why did the guest officials come to the south of the city to drink tea? With your identities, you should go to the middle or the east of the city." The guard followed Mu Yangling's instructions earlier in the morning. Our Lord loves to listen to stories. There has been a lot of noise about Qin Fang's incident recently. I heard that most people in the south of the city have suffered because of Qin Fang, so our Lord came here out of curiosity. Let's go. When the dozen or so prisoners heard this, they were about to explode, but the guards sitting beside them immediately put their knives on their waists and said in a low voice, "Our mother gave me an order when she came. If you don't say a word, we will just come out and go back. If you cause trouble, we don't mind using you to eliminate public grievances. Anyway, you won't speak up, and it's still useful to die at this time." A guard followed behind more than a dozen prisoners. Hearing this, his body froze. Thinking that he would still play a role for the Daki royal family after death, he suddenly didn't want to die. Seeing that they were sitting obediently, the guards moved some of their knives away a little. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1257. Linen is the capital city, at the foot of the emperor, and there are the most dignitaries here, but it doesn't mean that the people are oppressed the most. Although ordinary people are careful to watch the people on the road when they go out, the taxes and donations they face are relatively light. After all, at the feet of the emperor, there are still some face-saving projects that should be done. Therefore, most of the people here want to scold Qin Fang out of patriotism, and very few people have really lost their families because of his victimization. But the south of the city is different. 60% of the people in this area are refugees recruited after the war. Everyone has a hometown feeling, and people at that time felt that their hometown was their roots, so they would not leave home easily, and they would become refugees. Among other reasons, war and heavy taxes were the two most important reasons for moving here. So if you want to know how much the victims hate Qin Fang, the tea house in the south of the city is the best place to go. Many older middle-aged and elderly people gathered together to look at each other and shed tears, denouncing Qin Fang by recalling the tragic life more than 10 years ago. And the young people in their early 20s sitting on the side also talked about their childhood with emotion. They were young 13 years ago, and they didn't have the deep hatred of their elders, but the childhood sufferings are still deeply engraved in their hearts. Mu Yangling looked at the dozen or so prisoners and saw that they all had gloomy faces, so he knew it wasn't useless at all. Master Bai also followed her gaze. His eyes were full of brilliance, moved with emotion. He had also used the strategy of knowing the reason. He mentioned it from the big country to the small family, but it didn't have this effect at that time. Mu Yangling saw that they had heard them almost, so he put down his tea supplies and left. This time they went to a restaurant in Dongcheng. Mu Yangling asked for a big box, pushed open the window, stared at the endless flow of people below for a while, then turned to a dozen prisoners and said, "Come and have a look." They didn't want to go, thinking it was Mu Yangling's conspiracy, but the guards dragged them over directly. Chi Heiran and Lord Bai also opened another window to look out curiously. "There are people down there, so what's so strange about it?" But Mu Yangling pointed to the people on the street and said to them, "Look, the children on the street are brought by their parents or grandparents. Look at that child, the child standing in front of the candied house with his finger in his mouth, do you think he is happy? The faces of the prisoners were very heavy, of course they were happy, but he just looked back a few more times and dragged his father to buy him candied house. On the street, the young father stuffed candied house into his son's hands, emphasizing repeatedly, I don't have any money, so I'm not allowed to buy it in the future, your mother will be angry if she knows. The young son nodded again and again, holding the candied house in one hand and firmly holding his father's hand with shining eyes. There are many such happy children on the street. At a glance, they are either busy hawkers or buyers with their wives and children to lower prices. Although they are very ordinary, there is a touch of happiness. Ordinary people may not be aware of this happiness, but find it trivial, but these prisoners are all blood-licking people, and have never enjoyed this kind of peace since childhood, so this ordinary happiness has been magnified more than 10 times. Chi Heiran was also a person who came out of the battlefield. He quickly understood what a ling meant, and he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Master Bai frowned and looked at the street for a long time, but he still couldn't understand the mystery. He was about to ask each other when Mu Yangling asked calmly, everyone has parents, so what about your parents? The prisoners immediately woke up from their stupor, and said calmly, we are orphans. Why did you become an orphan? What do you mean? The prisoners were secretly angry. But Mu Yangling calmly looked into their eyes and asked, who said you are orphans? Why are you orphans? Your parents died, why did they die? Or did they throw you away? You are all healthy and boys, why did you throw you? The prisoners were taken aback. Mu Yangling turned to the window, looked at the passers-by outside and asked softly, isn't Qin Fang your adoptive father? Didn't he mention your parents and relatives to you? The prisoners swallowed nervously, they thought it best to leave at this time, otherwise they would be very uncomfortable. Yet the footsteps continued to be nailed to the floor and could not be moved. As if he didn't see their nervous expressions, Mu Yangling continued to ask, you are only in your 20s and 30s now, I wonder if you still remember your childhood. 2 or 3 prisoners shook their heads and said bitterly, we were all very young when we were adopted, so we don't remember. That means you have been raised by Qin Fang since you were adopted? Do you know what life the common people lived 20 or 30 years ago? Mu Yangling said softly, taxes are increased every year. Later, when it became impossible to increase taxes, donations, and labor time were increased. 60% of the field's harvest in a year has to be handed over to the yamen. And then after the autumn tax, there will be additional labor. They have thought about all the tax items they can think of, and the remaining food is less than 30%. Sickness, one sickness is a drag on the whole family. Do you know how many people sold their children back then? You think that Qin Fang raised you up, so his kindness to you is as great as a mountain, and you should repay it? You don't know that you became orphans because of him. Mu Yangling pointed to the child below and said, if at that time your parents will have the opportunity to love you so much if Qin Fang doesn't control your big week. The prisoners felt a sudden pain in their hearts, and stared blankly at the people below. Chi Heiran said in a deep voice, a lot of officials impeached Qin Fang back then, and those people were either framed and imprisoned, or all their families were executed. The Great Zhou Law stipulates that children under the age of 8 will be exempted unless they rebel. There were many infant children who disappeared from those adults' houses back then for no reason. Chi Heiran looked at the face of one of them and stopped talking. Lord Bai also stared at that person, his eyes gradually widened. Isn't this somewhat similar to Li Wenyuan back then? The faces of the prisoners turned pale, and Master Bai immediately fell silent. But at this moment, silence is better than sound, and the guards also stared curiously at the man's face, and then at the faces of other prisoners. Needless to say, these dozen or so people were either assassins or bandits, but they didn't show any banditry, on the contrary, they were pretty and handsome. The guards couldn't help muttering in low voices, is this orphan so good looking? How about I adopt one too? The prisoners also looked at each other, their moods fluctuated sharply. Mu Yangling coughed just enough, turned around and said in a deep voice, "Okay, I brought you out today just to let you understand that if you make a mistake, you are wrong. If you do it again, our master Qin Fang will still kill you." Qi Heiran weakly retorted, "Qin Fang was not killed by me, but by the second prince who conspired against him. Why do you all attribute his death to me? You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1258. No one listened to Qi Heiran's explanation, and the group directly escorted the prisoner back to the prison. The entourage beside Lord Bai said in a low voice, "My lord, do you want to strike while the iron is hot? Anyone with eyes can see that those people are loose. This is a phenomenon that has never happened before." Although Master Bai is also impatient, he has interrogated many prisoners, and he knows that it is better to be still than to move at this time, and he still needs to give them some time to think. Seeing that the princess and the prince were about to leave in the carriage, Mrs. Bai immediately chased after him and said, "Wait a minute, princess, what do you think the next step is to pry their mouths open? Shouldn't adults be better at this?" Mu Yangling wondered, "I'm not good at this. The concubine is too modest, you let them relax after taking them for a walk." "Master Bai," Qi Heiran stuck out his head from behind Mu Yangling, interrupting him, "the princess is really not good at interrogation." Qi Heiran said righteously, "Since we can't attack the body, then we will attack the heart. This time, the princess is attacking the heart, so Master Bai can do as it is. To put it nicely, who doesn't know that attacking the heart is the best thing, but who thought of pulling them out to go shopping before?" Master Bai felt that Prince Rong was inferior to himself in the interrogation, so he didn't need to listen to his opinion, so he still looked at Mu Yangling obsessively. Mu Yangling blinked and said, "Didn't you say that one of them was like Li Wenyuan before? Maybe this is a breakthrough." Master Bai immediately looked at Qi Heiran. Qi Heiran coughed lightly, and whispered in Mu Yangling's ear in embarrassment, "I made that nonsense, didn't I just use it as a helpless strategy when I saw that they didn't let go of their words?" "That's right, when Li Wenyuan's family was confiscated and exiled, his grandson was 3 years old, so he doesn't have any memory at all," Lord Bai said in a low voice. "The words only have some effect when their minds are shaken, and it's better to mention them later." He lifted a rock and shot himself in the foot. "Is the bandit really similar to Li Wenyuan?" Mu Yangling asked persistently. "It's true," Qi Heiran said, "when I was young, I fought with some young masters of the Li family. I saw him when the gentlemen called their parents over later on. That person does look a bit like Li Wenyuan. That's all right. Anyway, you didn't insist that he was Li Wenyuan's grandson, you just said that they look alike." Mu Yangling looked at them innocently and said, "Or you can drag them out to go shopping again. Listen more, I heard how much the common people hate Qin Fang." Qi Heiran immediately said, "Aling, you forgot to promise to help me curb these public opinions." Mu Yangling patted his hand and said, "That's another matter, don't worry, I will definitely help." Mu Yangling's help was to muddy the water. It is impossible for her to really help Qin Fang clean up. Her so-called speaking for him is just pulling more people out to share the responsibility. Because she is the owner of the newspaper, she went directly to the back door and published the article in the Times and Wengzhou newspaper at the same time. And what Qi Heiran values is her charisma, because Aling's influence among the people is stronger than him because of running a newspaper office and a harvest store. This time, Mu Yangling didn't talk about any big reasons, she just took herself as an example. Mu Yangling pointed out her attitude at the beginning of the article. If it is said that she has hatred with Qin Fang, she is no less than anyone else. If it is said that she hates Qin Fang, she dare not say the first, but the second and third can always be number one. There are three reasons. First, she is a native of Xinzhou Prefecture. She has lived in the border since she was a child, and she has a deeper experience of family and country enmity than non-border people. Second, Qin Fang once wanted to marry her concubine daughter to her husband as an equal wife. Even if she failed, she still hated to take her husband away. Third, Qin Fang's manpower left behind wanted to kill the children of the Qi family, and her husband and children were all children of the Qi family, and because Qin Fang died indirectly because of Qi Hao, Qi Heiran, and his sons were listed as the number one assassination target. So regardless of the current stage, she is one of the people who have the most reason to hate Qin Fang. But it doesn't mean that she can completely blame Qin Fang for the troubled times. Qin Fang is just a courtier, and a courtier from a poor family. Even if he is the prime minister, he is still under the supervision of the censor, and all officials can impeach him and restrict his power. Mu Yangling also deliberately explained the official system of the Great Zhou in the form of a list to tell everyone that the reason why a hero like Qin Fang was able to grow step by step was not only because of his ability, but also because the government was chaotic at that time, and officials extravagant and corrupt by nature. During the Great Zhou dynasty, how many people were officials who were unwilling to join forces with others, and where were those people serving? Qin Fang was still a student of Taifu Yan before she became the Zhoushilang of the household department. It is said that Taifu Yan valued him very much. Could it be that Taifu Yan also misjudged someone at that time? Taifu Yan did not misjudge the person, and all the people in the world did not misjudge the person. Before Taifu Yan broke up with him, Qin Fang was indeed a good official for a long time. I don't know if the people in Yazhu still remember that they were sent out by Jingyan 8 years ago. The Manmin umbrella. Is it only his fault that an official who once got the umbrella of the people became a world-famous treacherous minister? When Qin Fang was doing treacherous officials, what were the civil and military officials at that time doing, and what was the emperor doing? Does the emperor object when Qin Fang proposes to increase taxes every time? Did the civil and military officials object? At that time, the surname in the world was Guo, not Qin. Mu Yangling questioned, is it unfair to attribute the chaos of the Great Zhou dynasty to Qin Fang? After all, it was Emperor Jinjian who made the decision. How many civil and military officials at that time stood up to oppose it? Mu Yangling asked, you have always fought against Qin Fang, but in fact, you should fight against yourself and that superior emperor the most. Lin Wide put down the newspaper, his eyes sparkled, and asked his followers, how is it outside? The sky is turned upside down, said the entourage. The Times and the Wengzhou newspaper have all been sold out, and several college students fought because of disagreements. I heard that even several doctors from the Imperial College rolled up their sleeves in person. The common people should be quieter. Gradually, those who feel that what the princess said are reasonable will no longer scold Qin Fang, but instead scolded the late emperor. Fortunately, De Qi replaced De Zhou. This article is so good, it solved everyone's headaches in one go. Lin Wide said with a smile, she solved the previous problem, but she threw a more serious problem in front of everyone. I'm afraid the princes will have troubles at the court meeting tomorrow. What is the problem? Lin Wide's eyes sparkled, he patted the newspaper on the table with a smile, and said word by word, weaken the prime minister's rights and supervise his responsibilities. The attendant opened his mouth wide and said, isn't the prime minister's power and responsibility always the same? How can it be changed? Emperors can be replaced by others. What else is impossible in this world? The reborn wife is farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1259. Mu Yangling's article caused an uproar among all walks of life. In every dynasty, there will be a tyrant or a faint king to end the era of a dynasty. Xia had Ji, Shang had Zhou, and Qin had too, but no matter who they are, although they are called tyrants and fools, the world will always find them all kinds of things. Traitors or disasters to share the responsibility. For example, Xiaoji's subjugation was due to concubines, Shang Zhou's tyranny was due to Daji, and Qin too was corrupted by Zhao Gao. Anyway, there are certain reasons why the emperor was corrupt. The treacherous minister's deceit slowly turned bad. It is the first case like Mu Yangling to directly point out that the fault of the emperor is greater than that of the treacherous officials. Daki's speech was open, although the gentry felt that Mu Yangling's remarks were bold, but seeing that the emperor in the palace did not respond at all, they endured it. The common people who didn't know why saw it and felt that the princess was right. When everyone summed up the meaning of her article, they found that there were only three main points. First, if the emperor is stupid, the government will be chaotic. Second, the prime minister has too much power and responsibility, which can easily breed corruption and control the government. Third, the division of responsibilities between civil and military officials is unclear, and the officials are not well supervised, and dereliction of duty and corruption are easy to occur. The first thing everyone can only hope is to be as careful as possible in the royal family's education and election of the crown prince. Once the emperor takes office, it is difficult to replace it, because that means blood will flow in rivers, and it is not worthwhile for the overall interests or personal interests. So everyone will not discuss it for the time being. The key is that they dare not talk about it. Let the emperor talk to his sister-in-law about such things. But in the second and third articles, everyone can have a good chat about how to weaken the power and responsibility of the prime minister and supervise the officials. Seeing that everyone's eyes finally moved away from Qin Fang's body, Qi Ziyuan wished to bring up these two matters on his own initiative. Now that Daki has been unified, some things should change. Qi Ziyuan left Xiaoxiang in the palace and asked him to participate in political affairs with Xiao Bao. And Mu Yangling, who lit the fire and ran away, was happily writing to Qi Heiran at this time, telling him that she had completed what he asked her to do. When Qi Heiran received the letter, he was leading people to encircle Qin Fang's remaining private soldiers. He read the newspaper bought by Xiaolo, and then read Ling's letter. Finally, he folded the letter and newspaper and stuffed them into a big box. The envelope was handed over to Xiaolo, and he hummed, "Tell you princesses, we will discuss this matter with her when I go back." The prisoners couldn't help but confess in the end, not because they were moved by Mu Yangling's words, but because of the materials Qi Heiran and Master Bai sent to them. At most, Mu Yangling's statement made them shake their minds, and they had a little doubt about their persistence. But what Qi Heiran investigated directly crushed their beliefs. After parting with Mu Yangling that day, Qi Heiran ran to find Mr. Bai. His original intention was to find a way to make some fake things. It would be best to make that person believe that he was Li Wenyuan's grandson, who was adopted as a thug after being murdered by Qin Fang. If you want to falsify evidence, you have to thoroughly investigate Li Wenyuan's family, and you have to come up with something real. If you want people to believe something, you have to make it 4 or 5 points true. As a result, after checking Qi Heiran, he found that the man was indeed Li Wenyuan's grandson. This discovery made both Qi Heiran and Lord Bai feel chills in their hearts, and thus turned their suspicious eyes on the remaining 10 people. After careful investigation, I realized how terrifying Qin Fang was. Most of his adoptive sons were descendants of his enemies, and they were exiled and beheaded for resisting him. Most of those who were exiled also died halfway. It can be said that his enemies, except General Yuan, all died as badly as possible. The rest are the descendants of the fallen soldiers in northern Xinjiang. When a dozen or so prisoners saw the evidence, their first thought was, they forged the evidence. And Qi Heiran quickly confirmed that this thing was not forged, and Qi Heiran said to them, "The oldest of you is standing alone, so the servant or master who took care of you when you were young should still be alive. If you still doubt, better to ask them." The faces of the prisoners all darkened, and after a whole night of silence, the desire to explore their life experiences prevailed, and they told Chi-Heiran the addresses of those old servants and masters. To show his sincerity, Chi-Heiran deliberately took them to arrest people, and threw them to them for interrogation as soon as they were caught. Those people were all hired by Qin Fang to take care of her adoptive sons or educate them, or they were domestic servants or retainers. When the country was broken, this group of people died, fled, scattered, and some of them lost their lives. The adopted sons inevitably helped some of them secretly, so they knew the specific addresses of these people. When Qin Fang took in these children back then, she didn't intend to train them to become assassins or private soldiers. She just felt guilty, so she took action, which was to leave a blood for those people. That's why he didn't keep his secrets in the first place. According to the confessions of those old disciples, Qin Fang adopted these children with good intentions at the beginning. Your Excellency, the Prime Minister, felt ashamed. Seeing that the sons were young and ignorant, he wanted to leave a bloodline for the soldiers in northern Xinjiang and those loyal men. We were all selected to take care of the sons. Originally, the sons, when you reach the age of 14, you should go down the mountain and leave, the old doorman explained in a low voice. Before you, there are several sons who have reached the age of 14 and left, but unlike you, they didn't know that they were prime ministers until they left. Your Excellency adopted them, and the Prime Minister did not allow us to tell them their life experiences. As for why the Prime Minister changed later, I don't know. Anyway, Mr. Prime Minister is moody, he has long been used to it. Everyone's faces were angry, and they asked with cold eyes, if you feel guilty, why do you want to frame me and wait for your parents? The old doorman sighed and said, time and fate, your parents are determined to bring down the Prime Minister, so he naturally wants to protect himself. Everyone sneered, as long as he doesn't do treacherous things, why bother my parents to make things difficult for him? The old doorman closed his eyes, and said after a while, my Lord Prime Minister is good at guessing your Majesty's thoughts. What he did was just what your Majesty thought. Even Princess Rong knew that this matter should be Emperor Jinjian's fault. Chi-Heiran said coldly from the side, don't drag this matter on the concubine. Emperor Jinjian didn't ask Qin Fang to rebel with the second prince. The old doorman opened his mouth, thinking that he was no longer Qin Fang's person, and Qin Fang had already passed away. He really didn't need to offend others because of him, so he closed his mouth tightly and didn't speak. Because they were personally interrogated by bandit assassins, they believed the evidence presented by Chi-Heiran, and the foster father and benefactor who raised them suddenly became the enemy who killed their whole family. Faith is shattered. The breath they had been holding onto in their chests was released in an instant, and the whole person had no business, and they were almost like a living dead. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1260. Although Chi-Heiran was angry that they were going to kill his son and nephew, he couldn't help pity them at this moment. It is indeed pitiful to recognize a thief as a father in this way and still take it as a belief. Chi-Heiran felt compassion and didn't want to kill them anymore. Thinking about their skills, they are not bad, even if they don't serve as bodyguards and throw them into the army, it's no problem. So Chi-Heiran went to meet them with wine, and promised to restore their identities after Qin Fang's remnants were wiped out, and serve in the army or palace in an open and honest manner. The subtext is, you guys should tell the news about your accomplices. But they already had the will to die, and they didn't listen to Chi-Heiran's words at all, they just looked at the sky blankly. Chi-Heiran was so angry that he kicked them, and said angrily, who are you doing this for? Qin Fang knows to leave a bloodline for your family. You are lucky. It is so easy to live until now but begging to die. Before you I have been very sorry to my parents and family for more than 20 years, is it necessary to cut off their only blood so that they cannot rest in peace under the 9 springs? The bandit assassins were shocked in their hearts, and their eyeballs rolled slightly. Chi-Heiran saw that there was something going on, and continued to point them with his toes, get up, Get up, take me to catch the rest. I don't know how many people Qin Fang left behind this bandit den, how many people like you recognize the thief as your father. If they are allowed to go on like this, they will be sent to hell after they die, and they will not recognize their biological parents. It's okay if you didn't know before, but is it possible that you still want to protect Qin Fang? As soon as these words came out, several bandits immediately jumped up from the ground, and said with gritted teeth, I wish I could eat his flesh and drink his blood. How can I still protect him? As he said this, tears flowed down the line, and the people lying on the ground also turned sideways and covered their mouths in silent pain when they saw it. They are grateful for Qin Fang's kindness because he gave them a relatively peaceful and prosperous life. When the people outside were displaced, they could not only have a place to live, but also study and practice martial arts. Except for not doing it personally, they felt that Qin Fang had done everything a father should do. However, how much they respected him before, they hated him now, but it is not entirely true to say that their hearts are full of hatred. Not being able to absolutely hate the murderer who killed their family members and admitting to the thief as their father for more than 20 years, this is undoubtedly the most tormenting thing in their hearts. Although Chi Heiran didn't have that kind of experience, he could understand their current state if he put himself in their shoes. He doesn't know how others will deal with the pain and pressure, but he either solves it all at once, or finds something to do if he can't solve it, and when he looks back after a while, he will find that the problems that made him difficult to decide before will become easier many. Chi Heiran felt that the most important thing for these people was to vent, so he released them as prisoners without any pressure, and asked them to follow him to encircle Qin Fang's remnants. After fighting and sweating, people naturally figured it out. Qin Fang left 3 strongholds in total, and the 3 bandit dens were located within 3 or 4 days' journey from the capital. According to their explanation, Qin Fang's original intention was to let them watch over and help each other. They respond promptly when something goes wrong. But when Qin Fang left the capital and fled westward with the second prince, he was too hasty. They were only 17 or 18 years old at that time, and the construction of the 3 strongholds had just started, so they couldn't help him much. By the time they wanted to recruit troops to rescue Qin Fang, the adoptive father, Qi Ziyuan, had already quickly controlled the route to the west, and with Qi Heiran's army there, they might be regarded as the bandits were wiped out, but it wasn't enough for Qi Heiran to squeeze his teeth. So they had no choice but to give up the past rescue in groups, but disguised themselves as ordinary people and went there. Unexpectedly, when they arrived at the border, Qi Heiran had already besieged Qin Fang and the second prince to death, and the entire Great Zhou dynasty fell apart immediately. From then on, they hated Qi Heiran. These 3 strongholds can watch and help each other because the roads between them are smooth, and this is now cheaper for Qi Heiran. Qi Heiran ordered the local garrison to encircle another stronghold, and led a group of people to encircle one of the strongholds. Qin Fang's adopted sons were venting their anger on the mountain, attacking the stronghold with almost no regard for casualties. The guards who wanted to make a contribution could only follow them to help block the knife, otherwise the dozen or so people would be killed before they got in. Dead. But after the prince said that they are loyal ministers, he should leave a bloodline for these loyal people, so these people can't die. Did not marry a wife and have children. The guards followed them hard to help them cut off their swords, and when they saw more and more swords being greeted by the bandits, they immediately shouted angrily, "You can spare your lives, you won't die, we will die." The bandit leaders on the mountain were also very angry, and their eyes almost burst into flames. I didn't expect them to betray the foster father, and dare to call the door in person. They are not afraid of having nightmares at night. Did the foster father question them? One of the adopted sons suddenly said indignantly, "Let me ask them." They are both Qin Fang's adoptive sons. They grew up together, so their relationship is not bad, and they were distributed to various strongholds when they grew up. When Qi Heiran rushed over with a knife in hand, he heard the adopted sons on the mountainside laughing loudly at the mountain, and finally shouted with tears, "Do you think Qin Fang is really our benefactor? He is our enemy, sir. Enemy. We adopted sons are all descendants of his political opponents and fallen soldiers in northern Xinjiang." The people on the mountain were shocked. The people on the mountainside continued to say angrily, "All of us have recognized the thief as our father for more than 20 years. If you don't believe me, ask the old servant on the mountain, who are our parents and family." The people on the mountain immediately turned back to look for the old servant who had taken care of them since childhood, only to find that the person who was by his side just now had disappeared. What else did they not understand at this time? The bandits who were having a good fight with the officers and soldiers were taken aback for a moment, stopped their movements in unison, and looked at the officers and soldiers opposite each other, so they turned from enemies to accomplices. After all, the masters seemed to have betrayed. Well, there is no place for him to make a move at all. Chi Heiran put away the knife in his hand with a little regret, waved and said, "Disarm and don't kill, take all these people into custody and try them." Chi Heiran didn't care how Qin Fang's adoptive sons wanted to discuss this matter, and turned around to leave. He didn't know what was going on in the capital, so he had to go back early to have a look. "He is not in the capital, I am afraid that someone will bully Aling." Chi Heiran, who thought that Mu Yangling would be bullied because of the newspaper, didn't know that Mu Yangling was currently torturing all civil and military officials in the capital, and made Chi Ziyuan go through a lot of trouble. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1261. After Mu Yangling published the article, the effect was not bad. At least the people's emotions were no longer as excited as before, and the court didn't have to worry about the people causing troubles because of the excitement. She consciously fulfilled what she promised Chi Heiran, so she happily packed her things and took a few children to the farm to escape the summer heat, and avoid the limelight by the way. They went to play for 3 days, and the ministers in the court also quarreled for 3 days. The emperor and the prince watched them quarreling from above, absorbing some useful opinions from time to time. They are happy, but the little bear suffers. He was fortunate to be able to go out to listen to the government together with the crown prince, which was indeed an honor at his age, and there was no one younger than him in the civil and military affairs of the Manchu dynasty. In addition, he is the son of Prince Rong, and his rank is not low, so he stands in the forefront. Looking at the face that was 60% or 70% similar to Prince Rong, no one could ignore him. Thinking that this incident was caused by his nymph, the officials inevitably held hostility when discussing the matter, and every time they made suggestions or to refute the other party's argument, you have to ask Little Bear at the end, "What do you think, Prince Rong's son?" Little Xiong was at a loss. How could you expect me, a teenager, to understand questions that you adults in your 30s, 40s, 50s, and 50s don't know? But he has learned the Analects of Confucius, and his mother has repeatedly emphasized that what is known is what is known and what is not known is what is not known, so Xiao Xiong shook his head honestly and answered their questions, "I don't know." Seeing that he answered every question with this sentence, the courtiers immediately felt that this man was playing tricks on them. Although they had no good intentions in asking him questions, "We are also your elders anyway." None. And the word "I don't know" is said so confidently, isn't this too thick-skinned? As expected of being the son of Prince Rong, this is quite like a father. Because Chi Ziyuan was sitting on the top to protect his shortcomings, everyone dared to think these words in their hearts, but even though they didn't say them, the others asked Xiao Xiong more vigorously, and everything could involve him, and in the end even the person sitting on the top Chi Ziyuan couldn't see anymore, and frowned slightly. The prince had already stood up for his brother. He would intervene in any questions that the little bear couldn't answer, and finally threw the questions back, causing Chi Ziyuan to stare at him. After the court meeting ended, Little Bear walked out with his head down. Seeing this, Rong Xian couldn't bear it, stepped forward and patted him on the shoulder with a smile. Wenjin, do you want to rest for 2 days? Didn't your mother take your younger brothers and sisters to the farm to escape the summer heat? Why don't you go to, live in the farm for 2 days? Little Xiong shook his head. What kind of heat is there to avoid after the heat is over? My mother went to avoid trouble. At this time, the village is harvesting rice, and there is no fun, so I won't go. Seeing that his face was calm and not as angry as he expected, Rong Xian stared at his face carefully and asked, then you will come to court tomorrow? Of course I'm here, Xiao Xiong said as it should be. I promised Uncle Huang that I will learn to handle government affairs with the prince's elder brother. Rong Xian was silent for a while, looked at Xiao Xiong and asked hesitantly, don't you know that they deliberately made things difficult for you today? I know, I'm not a fool, I can't even see it so obvious. Rong Xian breathed a sigh of relief. He was really afraid that Little Bear would be so stupid that he wouldn't be able to see it. Then you're still here. Why don't you come? Little Xiong said as a matter of course. I promised Uncle Huang that he would study with the elder brother of the prince, and naturally he would go to court like ordinary courtiers. But they are bullying you, don't you feel wronged? Rong Xian asked with interest. How can you not be wronged when you work for an official? Little Xiong was very open-minded, and said, even the emperor has to be wronged sometimes, let alone me. If I only suffer a little grievance, I won't go to the early court. Then, if the emperor is wronged, he will stop the court. Other ministers will not work in the yamen if they are wronged. Merchants will not open the market if they are wronged. If you are wronged, you will not go down to the ground. If everyone is so self-willed, won't the world be in chaos? Out of the corner of Rong Xian's eyes, he saw that several adults had stopped, and a smile flashed in his eyes, and he asked with a smile, there are no rules, but your explanation is interesting. Little Xiong opened his mouth wide, scratched his head and said, aren't we talking about grievances, why are we getting involved with the rules again? The smile on the corner of Rong Xian's mouth froze slightly. When he met his dark eyes, he couldn't help laughing and shook his head, you're right, but I'm putting everything first. Although you are willing to be wronged, your parents dote on you. You may not be willing to see you being bullied by others, even if it is for them, you should avoid it temporarily, lest they feel distressed when they come back. After finishing speaking, he glanced vaguely at the courtiers who were eavesdropping around him, and seeing their faces froze, he knew that they had understood and was immediately satisfied. Little Xiong didn't know that Rong Xian beat the courtiers with this, and still explained to him solemnly, Uncle Rong, don't worry, my parents are willing to let me be wronged. My father said that I am too skinny, so someone should suppress me. It's okay. My mother also told us that if you suffer a fall, you will gain wisdom. People suffer, and the things you learn from being wronged are the most profound, so they all want me to be bullied. No wonder. Both Rong Xian and the people next to him rolled their eyes in their hearts when they heard this. They have a deep understanding of how much Prince Rong protects the calf. He will let his son be wronged? And Princess Rong is not a good person, and she spoils her children so much, she will hope that her children will suffer? Pull it down. Everyone didn't believe it. Others didn't believe it, but they became vigilant in their hearts, thinking that it is better not to trouble Little Bear tomorrow, so as not to cause trouble to the upper body. After all, not everyone can bear the anger of Prince Rong and his wife. However, Rong Xian rolled his eyes and decided to refute Little Bear with the facts, so Mu Yangling in the farm received a letter from Rong Xian that day, in which he truthfully described the fact that the civil and military forces of the Manchu dynasty bullied Little Bear, and added a sentence at the end. The nephew walked out with his head down. When he went down, he seemed quite depressed, and it hurts his heart to see it. Even Rong Xian was heartbroken, and Mu Yangling was so distressed. She snapped the letter with a snap and said with burning eyes, let's go back to Beijing. Hutu and the little lion shouted eagerly, Mother, let's go back and help Big Brother. Xiaoan also said, we will crush all the way back. Don't talk nonsense, Mu Yangling said calmly, they are older than us, we have to treat them gently. The three children shuddered together, while the twins clapped their hands and booed, I'll go too, I'll go too. Xiaofu grabbed them and said in a low voice, you know where to go and shout I'm going to. We won't go this time. Xiaoan and the twins also felt that Mu Yangling's face was a little strange, and they hesitated whether they should come forward. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Zhu. Chapter 1262. Mu Yangling rushed back to the capital that afternoon, which surprised the officials staring at Prince Rong's mansion, and felt a little guilty. As soon as they bullied the younger ones, the older ones came back. Don't come back to protect their weaknesses, right? With this doubt, these astute courtiers all reported honestly at the court meeting the next day, instead of asking Qi Wenjin for his opinion on everything like yesterday. This disappointed the little bear who had been waiting for a long time. Last night he was so excited that he didn't sleep all night, but no one asked him. Little Xiong drooped his head, and those ministers who were secretly watching him were relieved when they saw him. But not everyone has this vision. Some officials have long been displeased with the arrogance of Prince Rong's family. Everyone made things difficult for Qi Wenjin yesterday, still deeply imprinted in their minds, so they thought that Prince Rong's mansion had caused public outrage, so they naturally wanted to gear up and do a lot today. So when Xiao Xiong was drooping his head in disappointment, a censor standing in the middle and rear came out solemnly and said, Your Majesty, the idea that the Prime Minister has too much power and causes troubles is proposed by the Princess Rong, and the son of the Prince Rong is brought up by the Princess Da. Fang Shi should have the clearest understanding of this point. What is your opinion on this? The hall was silent for a moment. The previous adults really discussed whether or not to weaken the Prime Minister's power, and how to weaken it. At this time, it was appropriate for the censor to suddenly stand up and raise this question, but anyone with eyes could see that his question was aimed at the little bear. Seeing this young censor standing in the middle of the hall with his head bowed proudly, everyone couldn't help showing sympathy for him, only the doctor censor glared at him. Little bear's eyes lit up, waiting for this question. Little Xiong gave a serious cough, and tried his best to stand out with a sullen face, returned to the emperor, I believe that the power of the Prime Minister should be cut. Yan Du's eyes sank, while Rong Xian looked at him with a smile to show his encouragement. Qi Ziyuan gave an O in interest, and asked enthusiastically, then what method do you think should be cut? The Prime Minister is the head of all officials, and the left and right ministers have their own powers. If their powers and responsibilities are cut, who should be responsible for the cut-off? Yeah, that's what everyone is arguing about. You have weakened the power of the Prime Minister, which means that he can take care of less things, and who will take care of the responsibilities that have been cut out? The powers and responsibilities of the officials below have already been determined. If they are handed over to them, the entire official system will have to be changed. If it is to weaken the powers and responsibilities of the Prime Minister, this big move will not be worth the candle. Little Xiong couldn't think of this before, but yesterday Xiaobao chased him out and explained it to him thoroughly, and his mother taught him again when she came back. Now little Xiong understands it very well. He triumphantly raised his head and said to the emperor, Your Majesty, the Prime Minister's powers and responsibilities remain unchanged, we just need to increase the number of Prime Ministers. The court was quiet again, and then shouted loudly, increase the number of Prime Ministers. Is it possible to add a middle Prime Minister between the left and right Prime Ministers? This is blatant mockery. Qi Ziyuan coughed lightly, thinking that if the number of people increased, it would be a problem how to call it. Little Xiong didn't seem to hear their taunts, and continued according to his mother's intention, a cabinet can be set up, with 4 adults as the cabinet ministers, who will be in charge of the affairs of the 6 ministries, and military and state affairs must be decided by several cabinet ministers. Prime Minister: the rights and responsibilities have not changed but changed from 2 people to 4 people, and the rights owned by each person will naturally become smaller. Chi Ziyuan pondered. After Ah Ling's article came out, there was a commotion in the courtroom, but he never expressed his displeasure with her. One of the reasons was that what she said hit his mind. The Prime Minister is in charge of all the officials, and the power is indeed great. He wanted to weaken it, but he didn't do it because he didn't have a clue, because he was afraid that people would die if he acted rashly. Of course, it is impossible for him to die in his position. But for now, he is quite satisfied with his left and right sides, not to mention that Rongxian is still his good brother. He doesn't want to get rid of him by political struggle at this time. But at this moment, he felt that the suggestion put forward by Little Bear was very feasible. Why didn't he think of it before? The ministers also looked at the Little Bear complicatedly. Why didn't they think of such a good idea before? The powers and responsibilities of the Prime Minister remain unchanged, from 2 to 4. Doesn't that mean that the chances of worshipping the Prime Minister are greater? Although they only have half the power of the original Prime Minister, their chances have increased. Okay. What should they do if they are happy about this? Chi Ziyuan asked, then tell me specifically how the cabinet should operate. Are the 4 cabinet ministers only in charge of the powers and responsibilities of the Prime Minister, or are they also holding other official positions? Little Xiang blinked. Mother didn't seem to mention this point yesterday. Xiao Xiang said confidently, Your Majesty, you should discuss and formulate the specific matters with all the adults. The minister is still young, and although he has quick wit, he has little experience, so it is not enough to make a conclusion on this matter. Yan Du said indifferently, since the son made this suggestion, he should think about how to do it. Everything has its origin. You don't just think about this, do you? Everyone also looked at him suspiciously. Yes, all the people present were more experienced and talented than him. Why did he think of it when everyone didn't expect it? Little Bear smiled and said, Of course it's more than that. He raised his head solemnly and said to the crowd, Your Majesty, I think that not only the Prime Minister's powers and responsibilities need to be restricted and shared, but other official positions are also the same. There is a folk saying, the magistrate who destroys the family, the governor who kills the family. Is this true for all the county magistrates who assassinate the history? Xiao Xiang said seriously, Of course not. There are many good officials in the world, but they can be extorted and extorted. There are also violent officials. We can't just teach them with virtue, let alone check and deal with them after the fact, or there is no chance to check at all. The minister thinks that we have the opportunity to stop if we know before or when it happens. Only by saving people and preventing the people from destroying their families due to violent officials is a good official system. Chi Ziyuan said, the censor terrace monitors all officials, and there are censors sitting in various places. Do you want to increase the number of official positions? It will inevitably be redundant, and it will waste the people and money. That's why the minister suggested that it is better to let the common people supervise. Chi Ziyuan's eyebrows twitched, feeling a little ominous in his heart. Sure enough, Xiao Xiang continued to say enthusiastically, the county magistrates and governors are all parents and officials. They may be good or bad. The common people may not be able to judge because of the lack of information before, but now the Times has been sold to all parts of Daki. It is not difficult for the common people to know the policy, but it is difficult for them to use the court's laws to corrupt the law. The censor may be negligent, but the common people will never be negligent, because it is related to their own interests. Before Chi Ziyuan could speak, Yan Du asked, how do you plan to let the common people monitor the officials?